Welcome to Open Tab. Today is July 10th, 2020. And before I get into anything of this video, if after watching the video that you do feel that it's worthwhile, that it's made you think, please share it with people that you know. Like, subscribe, obviously. I'm really not concerned about getting to the point where I'm getting monetized for my videos. I am more concerned with getting information out and people thinking for themselves. If anything in this video is, if I'm just wrong, if I'm just straight up wrong, then tell me. But all of the sources, all of the tabs at the top, I will have linked in the description of the video so that you can look for yourself and come up to your own conclusions about things. I think it is important that we are informed about the things that we believe in rather than just emotional about the things that we feel are important. That being said, I want to come back to this interview with Don Lemon and Terry Crews from a few days ago, just to show really how misleading, deceitful, and divisive Don Lemon is. And the corporation, the media outlet that he works for, CNN, they are quite literally activists in disguise. They're disguising themselves as journalists, and they're not. So we're going to go through and watch some of this, and I'll give you my opinion based off of facts. So this first cut is from 2 minutes and 23 seconds to 2 minutes and 49 seconds into the interview.
You think if Black Lives Matter is, you said you think it's an extreme movement? Because it's now part of the...
No, but this is the thing. It's a great mantra. It's a true mantra. Black lives do matter. But when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the leaders. You're talking about the people who are responsible for putting these things together.
I got you. So let me, but
different thing.
Cherry,
Okay, so Don Lemon, obviously, he starts to interrupt. This becomes more of an interruption than an actual interview. But Terry Crews makes a really good point there, that the organization Black Lives Matter and the mantra, or the mantra as he calls it, Black Lives Matter, are two different things. Yes, that is a great mantra to have. Black lives do matter. However, the organization is quite a bit different than just the slogan. So what do Black Lives Matter actually believe? Okay, so where's the difference here? Because if you're going to say that Black Lives Matter, you're going to assume that you're talking about all Black lives. Well, so let's go to the Black Lives Matter website. Now, if you click on About and What We Believe, these are their belief statements, their ambitions, their goals. Now, one of the things, and this is going to be important about what we're going to talk about in just a second because of how it has an impact on the African American community. One of their belief statements or one of their goals is, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another. Okay? This is the important part, though. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. Why is that important, and why is that detrimental to the African American community? Well, in 2008, President Obama gave a speech at Apostolic Church of God in Chicago. This was his Father's Day speech. Why? The importance of fatherhood. Now, I'm going to summarize or paraphrase some of this, but in his speech, and you can read along with me if you like. I'm going to read the part that I've paraphrased over here. It said, in his speech, he said that of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, we are reminded today that family is the most important. Well, Black Lives Matter wants to disrupt that. That's one of their main objectives or goals. Later in his speech, President Obama stated, speaking of fathers specifically, in the African American community. He stated, "They have abandoned their responsibilities, acting like boys instead of men, and the foundations of our families are weaker because of it." You know, and I know how true this is in the African American community. We know that more than half of all black children live in single parent households, a number that has doubled since we were children. We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, and 20 more times likely to end up in prison. They are more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teenage parents themselves, and the foundations of our black community are weaker because of it. There are some facts there, and it's President Obama. So if you hate President Trump, it's not President Trump that's saying those things. It was President Obama who's saying those things. So if you're still living in, 2008, then you should be listening to that. Okay? President Obama himself even states there that it is important that a family have a father present. Without those things, kids become criminals, especially in the African American community. Okay, now back to the interview with Terry Crews. This cut goes from 6:18 to 6:49.
The Black Lives Matter movement was started because it was talking about police brutality. If you want an all Black Lives Matter movement that talks about gun violence in communities, including, black communities, then start that movement with that name. But that's not what Black Lives Matter is about. It's not an all-encompassing. So if you're talking about, if someone started a movement that said, cancer matters, and then someone comes in and says, why aren't you talking about HIV? It's not the same thing.
Bingo, you're right. You're right, Don. It's not the same thing, because cancer and HIV are not even related. Those are apples and oranges. That is the stupidest example he could have used. Now here, I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna fix that for you, Don. Let's say that we're gonna use that cancer analogy. Okay? That would be like saying there is a group called Cancer Matters, but they only focus on pancreatic cancer. All the other cancers, they don't even worry about. If you have breast cancer, you're not included. If you have testicular cancer, not included. If you have prostate cancer, not included. Skin cancer, not included. None of those things matter to them other than pancreatic cancer, despite the fact that they're called Cancer Matters. So why are you called Cancer Matters? Like, that'd be seriously like somebody, imagine if Black Lives Matter was the group that answered the phone if you had to call 911 because you were shot. Okay? First off, the requirement would have to be that you're black. Okay, so let's say you're a black person that has been shot and you call 911 and they answer. The conversation might go something like, 911, what's your emergency? I've just been shot. Well, wait, sir, who is it that shot you? My neighbor. Well, is your neighbor a white police officer? No. Why does that matter? I'm dying. I'm bleeding out. I'm going to die if you don't help me. Well, sir, we're not all encompassing. We only focus on people that have been shot by police. Now, if you want an emergency service that deals with all people that have been shot, then maybe you should go and start your own emergency services, because we only focus on people that have been shot by police. Click. That's essentially what they do to the African American community. They lure people in with virtue signaling that they're a great cause to get behind. They have this slogan, Black Lives Matter. Of course they do. Of course they do. Who is going to disagree with that? Nobody's going to disagree with that. But then when they get you in, unless you fit into their little bubble, their little defined section of you have to have been victimized by police, Otherwise, your issue doesn't matter to us. Now, Don Lemon, in using that stupid example of comparing cancer and HIV, which totally does not work, he doesn't just share that stupid example. He also lies and says that Black Lives Matter is solely focused on police brutality. Well, if that's the case, Don, then why are people tearing down monuments and statues all across America? Now, I can understand, yes, maybe some of those things are triggering to people, especially the Confederate statues. I get that. I understand that. But Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, I mean, yes, Thomas Jefferson, he did own slaves. But is that why we built statues of him? No. Martin Luther King Jr. was accused of doing some pretty horrific things as well. But do we change the names of streets that have been named after him? No. If we removed every statue or tore down every monument or memorial with a person's likeness or image or name on it, we wouldn't even be left with Jesus, because people would have an issue with getting Christ involved, because we're so thin-skinned and fragile that everything has to be offensive now. Everything has to be offensive, and everyone has to be a victim. If you're not a victim, then you have to be standing up for someone else who has been victimized in some way, because you have to virtue signal. You have to let everybody know how virtuous you are or how victimized you are. Now, I mentioned Thomas Jefferson, that, yeah, he owned slaves. Horrible thing. Nobody is praising him for that. When we look to Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers, we look at the ideals that they put down on paper, the foundation that they set, that they created for America to become what it has become and what it can become even further down the road. That's why we memorialize people. That's why we build monuments. That's why we have heroes. No one is perfect. Even Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was accused of witnessing a rape and laughing about it. A writer by the name of David J. Garrow, he's a Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer of King, ended up getting a hold of some FBI documents. Now, in those documents, he found out this. It says the most shocking claim, and this is from Politico, states the most shocking claim Garrow relates is that King was present in a hotel room when a friend of his, Baltimore pastor Logan Kearse, raped a woman who resisted participating in unspecified sexual acts. The FBI agent who surveilled the room asserted that King, quote, looked on, laughed, and offered advice. Okay, but we're not going around tearing down statues of Martin Luther King Jr. Why? Because we didn't build those statues to memorialize him witnessing a rape. We built those things. We named streets after him because he championed the civil rights movement. We look at the good things that people do. One of my favorite quotes from, and I know this sounds off topic, but one of my favorite quotes from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies is in the first movie. Jack Sparrow saves Elizabeth, Keira Knightley's character, from drowning. And when they capture Jack Sparrow, Elizabeth kind of pleads his case for him. And she says, pirate or not, this man saved my life. To which one of the soldiers there states, one good deed is not enough to save a man from a lifetime of wickedness. And then Jack Sparrow replies, though it seems enough to condemn him. Like, we don't build monuments for the bad things that people do. We build them for the good things that people do. But as soon as we find out the one bad thing that a person has done, we cancel them. We tear them down. we destroy them, whether it's their careers or their lives or just the memory of them. Now, back to this interview. This cut goes from 7:06 to 7:40.
You understand what I'm saying?
But when you look at the organization, police brutality is not the only thing they're talking about.
I know that. I agree, but that's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is about, Terry. Black Lives Matter is about police brutality and about criminal justice. It's not about what happens in communities when it comes to crime, black on black crime. People who live near each other, black people, kill each other. Same as whites. 80-some% of white people are killed by white people because of proximity.
Very true.
It's the same thing with black people. That happens in every single neighborhood.
Okay. First off, Terry Crews has the patience of a saint. You can just tell he's a good guy for the fact that he is so patient with Don Lemon constantly talking over him. Like, he brings him on his show to interview him, and as soon as Terry Crews doesn't go along with the narrative that Don Lemon is trying to push, Don Lemon basically stops the interview and then just talks over him until he runs out of time. Okay, now in that clip, Don Lemon mentions murders based off of proximity. So whites living next to whites, blacks living next to blacks. Of course, there's going to be more murders in those communities with that same group because they live close to each other. Okay, now let's look at that information. Okay, now according to the U.S. Census Bureau, this is from 2019, the percentage of whites in the United States is 60%, but half of that 60 is males. So let's say 30% of males. If we're going to assume that males are the ones that are murdering each other, okay, 30%. If you look at black or African American, 13.4%. So let's say about half of that, so around 6 to 6.5, 7% are African American males. And let's assume that they are the ones also committing most of the violent crimes, the murders, okay? Now, in 2000, so every year, the FBI UCR stands for Uniform Crime Reports, is published online. Now, the most recent complete data is from 2018, and this shows the number of victims that have been murdered and by what the race of the offender or the person who committed the murder, what race they belong to. Now, according to this, in 2018, 2,677 whites were killed by other whites. Black or African American, 2,600 were killed by other blacks or African Americans. There is only a difference of 77 people. So you have 30% of the population killing only 77 people more than 6% of the population. So yes, proximity does matter. You're right there, Don. But why is one group killing a significantly larger amount of each other? Now, when you compare that number, 2,600, to the number of unarmed blacks that were killed by police in 2019, 25. Now, that number, 25, includes people, African Americans that were shot, tased, beat, or killed by a vehicle. Okay, that's all of them. 25 in 2019 compared to 2,600 in 2018. So yes, is that a problem that 25 unarmed people were killed, blacks were killed by police? Yes. The number should be zero. Honestly, the number should be zero. But who is Black Lives Matter really putting their focus on? They're putting their focus on less than 1% of the population that are murdered. Less than 1%. It's 0.09. 0.009. They're putting 100% of the blame and 100% of the focus on less than 1% of the murders. So who are they putting their focus on? Oh, and just to verify that I'm not full of crap, it's the Washington Post that compiles the information about unarmed shootings and deaths. Says here, and this is from USA Today, the Post regularly updates the database as information about cases is released. So it's possible it showed 8 unarmed black male deaths instead of 13 at the time. Down here, mapping police violence, a crowdsourced database that includes deaths by vehicle, tasering, or beating in addition to shootings, estimates 25 police killings of unarmed black men in 2019. So Black Lives Matter doesn't care about the innocent kids that were shot and killed. Nor do they care about David Dorn, the retired police officer who was protecting his friend's pawn shop during the riots. And they're silent also about the man that was killed while holding his daughter's hand as they crossed the street in the Bronx just a few days ago. Black Lives Matter has been totally silent about these people. And what does the left love to say? Silence is violence. You don't matter. The only way you can matter is if there was a police officer involved. Now, since this started with Don Lemon, I'm going to give him the last tab. This is Don Lemon from 2013. And boy, oh boy, has his opinion about things changed. Well, obviously, because he's a part of the regressive left. Not the progressive left, the regressive left. It's like watching Joe Biden slowly lose his mind, except for it's an entire political party, the regressive left. So what did Don Lemon have to say in 2013? Here you go.
So please, black folks, as I said, if this doesn't apply to you, I'm not talking to you. Pay attention to and think about what has been presented in recent history as acceptable behavior. Pay close attention to the hip-hop and rap culture that many of you embrace, a culture that glorifies everything I just mentioned, thug and reprehensible behavior, a culture that is making a lot of people rich, just not you, and it's not going to.
Yeah. And with that, this tab is closed.